So I just got back from quite an amazing weekend, and of course it was filled with a lot of shooting involved. To get to our location, we had to travel about 5 hours on the road up north. And during the drive, I was just reminiscing and thinking why I was having so much fun, particularly for this kind of shoot. And that's when I realized this particular kind of shooting scenario is definitely the best to master landscape photography. I realized that while there were a lot of challenges while we were shooting, it made me really happy because it made me remember everything that I learned out in the field when I was practicing and when I was trying to master landscape photography. That's why in this video, let's talk about what, in my opinion, is the best location to master landscape photography. So we had an amazing weekend over in Baler. Baler is basically one of the northeast edges of the Philippines. It is about 250 kilometers up north. So the travel time, if you leave at the right time, would be around 5 hours just to get to Baler. Now this place being one of the many edges of the archipelago, which is the Philippines, particularly the island of Luzon, you would know that what we would find here is a great coastal scene. What we would find here is basically the edge of the land that goes into the Pacific Ocean. Now, when I was starting out as a landscape photographer, I frequented scenes like these. In fact, one of my favorite places to go was Dingalan, Aurora. When I would go on trips to other places, other countries, the easiest places to find are also the coastal scenes. Even if you know nothing about the place, you can just go look for the ocean and shoot where the ocean meets the land, and you can have a lot of amazing photography experiences. Now, there are many reasons why I think that coastal locations and shooting seascapes will be a very good way to master landscape photography. Of course, obviously, shooting seascapes would be the best way to master seascapes, duh. But what I'm saying is that shooting seascapes might even get you ready for other shooting scenarios. May that be up on a mountain, shooting from a cave, or something like that. This is because when you are shooting seascapes, you get a really good variety of changes. You get a really good variety of challenges as well. For one, when you are shooting seascapes, this is one of those instances wherein you have access to an empty horizon. This is one of those instances where you can experience and photograph the sun as it rises or it sets, depending on where you are facing and also depending on what obstructions there might be around. A lot of landscape photographers find scenes wherein the sun is visible in frame to be very dynamic, and I totally agree. However, shooting scenes with the sun in frame are definitely easier said than done. Now, since coastal locations are also very good spots for capturing the sunrise and the sunset, it is also a good way to practice how you adapt to the changing light. If you are a beginner photographer as early as now, I want you to know that one of the biggest challenges when you are shooting is the fact that the light changes very rapidly. This is even more true when you are shooting in a country that is close to the horizon. For some context, if you are shooting in the US, for example, the golden hour is a golden hour. When you are shooting in the Philippines, the golden hour is a mere 15 minutes. Now, can you imagine having to make faster decisions when it comes to the filters that you are using, your composition, your settings, just because there's a possibility of you missing the shot that you want to capture if you were too slow? Since you are in a coastal area shooting the sunrise or the sunset, this will definitely help you make faster decisions and basically master the thought process of doing landscape photography, and more importantly, help you learn how to adapt to the changing light. Now, another reason why I think that these places are the perfect places to practice landscape photography is also because the environment always changes. You could be shooting at 3 p.m. and when you get to 5 p.m., the environment is totally different. Obviously, one of the changing aspects would be the light, the direction of the light, and the quality of the light. However, in addition to that, you also have the landscape itself. Since the tide rapidly changes in these locations as well, you would get foreground elements at one time and probably not get them at another time. Depending on when you start shooting, you could probably capture some minimalist seascape scenes, for example, doing very long exposures with nothing in the foreground. And after a few hours, if you wait or if you shoot that long, you could be getting very dynamic wave paintings. In a matter of a few hours, the tide could have subsided and you would get a lot of sea stacks or rocks in the foreground that can help you create more dynamic compositions. So because of that, you can practice so many different styles of landscape photography or so many different styles of seascape photography and so many different ways to capture the place just because the place itself changes and allows you to take different approaches in capturing the photos. Following that logic, it's also the best kind of shooting scenario to be able to practice how you use your filters. I could go on a seascape shoot and basically use every kind of filter that I have. What I always say about using filters for photographing seascapes is that you either build up or you build down. When you're shooting during sunrise, you basically build up. You start with no filter at all, then with the GND, then with a light ND filter, maybe a CPL, then later on you get to use even heavier ND filters. On the other hand, if you are shooting before sunset, you can use darker ND filters to do longer exposures. Then eventually as the light begins to decrease, you also decrease the density of your filters. Perhaps a perfect day of shooting seascapes would start at around 3 a.m., which is pretty much what we did. And at 3 a.m., you also have the chance of doing astrophotography. Then as the sun starts to come up, of course, your workflow will be quite different. Now, right before and even during sunrise, you can start to shoot with just a GND filter. Most of the time, you're gonna use just a soft graduated ND filter just because you want to give a bit more light on the foreground as well. As it gets brighter, you can start shooting with the 3-stop ND filter and do wave painting with very dynamic foregrounds. Of course, as it gets brighter and brighter, you're gonna change into a 6-stop ND filter, maybe even a 10-stop ND filter. And later on, when the sun has risen way up, you can start shooting longer exposures with even a 15 or 16-stop ND filter. Of course, if you're starting during midday, this would be the total opposite. You start shooting with heavier ND filters because the light is abundant with the sun way up in the sky. As it goes down, you decrease your ND filters because you don't need heavier ND filters at the time. Later on, you end up with a 3-stop or maybe even just a GND filter. And much later on, of course, you get to shoot the night sky as well. When it comes to using the different variants of GND filters, of course, if you are shooting in a scene wherein there is something in the foreground that protrudes above the horizon line, then you just use a soft GND. If the horizon is clear and the sun is rising or setting somewhere in between, then you can of course use a hard ed or even a reverse GND during the sunrise or the sunset. And that's basically everything that you have in your landscape photography filter bag. Now, lastly, I think the biggest benefit is just being able to build resilience as a landscape photographer. Of course, when you are shooting seascapes, you will be hit by waves, your gear is gonna get wet, your tripod is gonna get wet. So you kinda also learn the importance of getting good gear, especially a good sturdy tripod that can withstand a bit of salt water. You will also see the importance of investing in camera gear that is somehow weather sealed, or if not, at least you will see the importance of a good rain cover. It might seem trivial at first, but also the quality of the filters that you have will also come into play so much, especially when the filters that you are using get hit by water. You want filters that are hydrophobic, that don't absorb any of the moisture, and that you can easily wipe off with just one wipe. If you would ask me, the kind of thrill that I always look for as a landscape photographer is basically getting my feet wet, getting my tripod wet, and just, being able to capture the crashing waves in a very dynamic seascape location. So shooting seascapes actually teach you the many different approaches that you can do in many different kinds of landscape photography. The changing light environment also allows you to just keep practicing and learning the many challenges that you might have when it comes to exposure. Of course, this also means that you get to master all the filters that you have or all the filters that you might realize that you want to have because of all the possibilities that you can shoot. At the end of everything, you become more exposed to the environment, more exposed to harsh shooting locations. You get the wind, you get the water, you get the sand and everything else. You also learn to be more careful, which is very important if you're a landscape photographer, and ultimately, you get to have a really fun time. Now, of course, everything that I just said are all applicable to many different seascape locations. However, this particular trip that we did was in Baler, Aurora, and I really loved it, not just because of all the experiences, but also because of the abundance of details that you have in the many shooting locations that we went to. This trip was made possible and arranged by my good friends from Shutter Adventures Co. They are a group of very passionate landscape photographers who arrange photo tours and shooting experiences. And if you live in the Philippines or if you are visiting the Philippines sometime soon, then you can check their website down below and check out what tours they have in the future that you can join. They also do tours in Iceland, in Japan, and in Indonesia and many other places, so check out their website down below. You know, being a landscape photographer is not something you learn overnight, and definitely it's not something that you learn just on YouTube and not just something you learn on reading articles such as what I always put out. On top of everything I say in videos, on top of everything I say in articles, the most important thing that you do is to get your ass out there and start shooting. Now, if you have any questions about what I said, or maybe you have something to add about seascapes, or you have a differing opinion, leave them down below in the comment section. Of course, my name is Nico Valenzuela. I am a landscape and architectural photographer, and this channel talks about exactly that, plus the gear that I use in my own trips and my own shoots. If you're new to the channel, then please do click that notification bell and that subscribe button. But in any case, thank you for watching.